Hi, everyone. So, it's my birthday, my 30th birthday, which is a big milestone. And for my 30th birthday, I am celebrating. I'm going to Yosemite with some friends, which is going to be awesome. But I also wanted to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about my journey because it might help and inspire others. And specifically, I wanted to talk about my journey with depression, suicidal thoughts, and anxiety. So, to explain things, we have to sort of go back 10 years ago. I think even before 10 years ago, I had been depressed and been dealing with depression, but it really came to a head 10 years ago when I was in college. And I was not engaged with class at all, feeling super unhappy, feeling directionless, and I just had constant suicidal thoughts. And I didn't realize what depression was until I hit rock bottom. I checked myself into the mental health facility because I realized, hey, I'm kind of a danger to myself at this point. And they diagnosed me with depression. And I had to take some time off from school because I was like not going to class, failing out of classes. I could like barely leave my dorm without crippling anxiety. So I took time off from school. I completely isolated myself from my friends. I didn't let them know out of shame. And that started the journey of a lifetime, I guess, with trying to beat the thing, right? Trying to beat depression and trying to beat anxiety as well and just live a better, happier life. So while I was home from school, I started seeing a therapist. And at the time, I remember thinking that this therapist is not that good and I don't really see what I'm getting out of it. But I also remember this distinct moment, I'm never going to forget it, where I was just looking at myself in the mirror one day and it felt like a switch flipped rather. And I just realized I wanted to live and I wanted to beat this thing. So I started all of a sudden getting super motivated. This is sort of a second time in my life I've been super motivated. The first time that I remember this happening was when I wanted to really go to Harvard College. And I started working out and just taking much better care of myself. Started like researching all different physical routines and supplements and anything that could help me in my condition. And in over the course of a year, I did sort of get back to a better baseline point. And I thought, okay, good. I've beaten this thing. I've managed it. I'm fine. And I stopped seeing a therapist after 3 sessions, which is a big mistake because it removes sort of an external sounding board for actually examining whether I'm in an okay state or whether I'm deluding myself to think the case. And it turns out I was deluding myself. Basically, for the last 10 years, I've still had suicidal thoughts, not nearly as frequent as when it was rock bottom, but I thought it was just normal. I kind of assumed everyone had them, to be honest, which is like crazy in hindsight. Still was very anxious and I was very much aware of the anxiety. In general, I just wasn't all that happy. And I thought, oh, this is just normal. I'm just not a particularly emotional person. I don't. For instance, I took evidence that like I didn't cry that much to be okay. I just don't have huge emotional range, so maybe I just don't feel that happy, but maybe that's normal. And I sort of, I guess, distracted myself and fooled myself into thinking, oh, I am happy. I've lived a really fortunate life, gotten to do all kinds of awesome stuff in all kinds of awesome places all over the world with awesome people. But 6 months ago, rather, when COVID hit and I quit my job, I went from seeing friends and loved ones on a regular basis and be able to just like live my life with distraction and telling myself that I'm happy and travel places and go to festivals and all these things. And from seeing people in a workplace and having that work to distract me and all the sort of mollifying effects that working a 9 to 5 can have, to being isolated, not having that natural sort of flow of social events and all these things to distract me. And then I was just left with myself, right? And it was then that I started to realize, no, I don't think I am happy. And I started seeing my therapist much more regularly. And at this point, it was the worst depressive episode. It got started around 6 months ago. Worst depressive episode that I've had since college. Now, fortunately, because of the work that I've done over the last 10 years on myself, from working out, meditating, eating better, just being more mindful in general, I was able to manage my depressive episode way better. And I realized, hey, I need help. So instead of just spiraling like I did in college, I said, okay, I'm going to start seeing my therapist every 2 weeks now. And I'm going to look into medical treatment, so antidepressants. And I sort of always resisted antidepressants because I thought, well, I don't really need them. I'm fine. Oh, I don't want to be addicted to something. I don't know if it would even work. I'll have side effects. But at this point, I was just willing to do anything because it got to the point where I had to tell myself, like literally out loud, hey, you're not going to kill myself. You're not going to kill yourself. And when you're at that point, you know something's wrong. There's just no hiding from it. So my therapist recommended that I see a psychiatrist and talk about medical options. Spoke to a psychiatrist. They diagnosed me with dysthymia. So dysthymia is basically a type of depression where you are having depressive episodes for months or years on end. So maybe not as severe, but it's longer lasting, which made a lot of sense to me because I just gone years without really feeling happy. I didn't really understand when people said that they love life. I was like, life is okay. Honestly, if I died, I mean, I guess you don't care about anything once you're already dead, but it didn't really bother me, the idea of dying. And in some sense, it would have been nice, honestly. That's the mental headspace I was in. But I didn't want to do antidepressants because something in me just told me the idea of trying 2 to 3 week trials of something and then it may not work and then you have side effects and just, I don't know, there's just something about it that just wasn't all that appealing to me. So, enter ayahuasca. Ayahuasca is something that I've been aware of for probably the last 2 to 3 years. And at first, 2 years ago or 3 years ago, it'd just been something that I regarded as the last step on the psychedelic journey, something that would be really cool to try, but not something that could be a source of spiritual enlightenment that I was in need of. But then 6 months ago, when I hit rock bottom again, I said, you know what? Worst case scenario, I try ayahuasca. If it doesn't work, I can go on antidepressants, and then we can just figure this out as we go along. So I told my parents, told my therapist. They're all really supportive, which I really credit my parents in particular for because they're immigrants from Ghana, which doesn't have a culture of recreational drug use, let alone something as extreme as ayahuasca. So they were a little concerned, but they knew how hard of a time I was going through, so they were just supportive and they loved me and they wanted to just make sure I'm okay. So I did some research. I found places I wanted to go to in South America, but unfortunately, borders are closed due to COVID. So instead, I ended up going to a place called Soul Quest in Orlando, Florida. And for those of you who've seen the documentary on Netflix, it's called Unwell. It's a series of episodes about different health and wellness trends. Episode 5 is about ayahuasca, and Soul Quest is the place in Orlando, Florida that they're talking about. So I ended up going there. Had an excellent experience there. I highly recommend it for anyone who wants to try this for whatever reason. And it's interesting because when you arrive, generally when you think of the crowd who is willing to even touch psychedelics, you're thinking like 20 and 30-year-olds, West Coast, liberal, tech-oriented, goes to music festivals, that kind of stuff. But this was not that at all. This was an eclectic crowd of people from all different colors, shapes, sizes, and ages. And what we all had in common was that we all wanted healing. So you get there and you quickly realize no one's there to have a recreational experience. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm not going to judge anyone who does. But everyone there, for what I could see, was there to really work on themselves and grow. And in the weeks prior to your ayahuasca ceremony, and they actually recommend 3 ceremonies, not just one. So it's not like a one and done if you're there to do really serious work. They actually recommend 3, not just at Soul Quest, but even at other places that I inquired. And you do, but the experience rather starts weeks before, and you engage in something what's called a dieta, which I'm assuming or guessing translates to diet in English. So I've been preparing. Every retreat and shamanic tradition has a different approach to it, but general stuff that you're going to find in a lot of these traditions is no alcohol, no consuming animal products, no sex, no recreational drug use, and the days up to it leave the sugar and I think starch consumption, definitely sugar consumption, keep those to a minimum. So you actually do some preparation in beforehand to just increase your sensitivity to stuff, because we're so overstimulated by like sugar and like, everything, like, recreational drugs, alcohol, sex, media, everything. So that's part of it. And also, for those of you who are familiar with ayahuasca, you're probably familiar with the infamous reports of people vomiting and shitting themselves, which is a thing. Not to bury the lead, but I'll inform you, I did not vomit, nor did I shit myself. And I think that's partially because I did the diet beforehand. I actually went vegan earlier this year, and I did it before I wanted to go on the ayahuasca retreat, so it actually worked out pretty nicely. And so you do all this preparation, and you also have intentions that you set. Now, for me, on a tactical level, what I wanted to do is cure my depression and anxiety and stop having these suicidal thoughts that were running my life. But on a higher level, I just wanted to become the highest version of myself, because I felt like I was being held back from doing that. And it's interesting because almost the moment I committed, like really was serious about going to the retreat, like I booked my flights, I, put my deposit on the trip, things immediately started getting better. Like even just knowing that I was working toward that immediately made me feel a lot better in the week before. So anyway, I get there. On the first day, you're split into 3 groups. I think 20 to 30 people each. And in our group, it's called an integration group. You go around in a circle and you talk about what you're trying to get out of your experience. And let me lower this a little bit. And it's raw. It's like super raw. Like people are talking about being trafficked as a child, finding their partner's dead body one day and not being able to get the vision out of their mind, going to war and killing people, or seeing people, your friends, killed in war and not being able to get over the PTSD. So you have middle-aged housewives, you have people like me, you have veterans, all different types of people. So you get there and you immediately realize people are here to be healed, and it's you have a sense of connection with everyone. And that's really important, because just like you don't just do ayahuasca once, generally if you're looking for serious work, having a communal experience is part of it. Having a communal experience and that support system and that sense that you're all healing together and people to process your experience with in conversation after is super important. And I can't imagine having done this experience without that. Or I can imagine it, but it would have been pretty shitty by comparison. So fast forward to the first night. It's the first night, and we all line up for the ceremony. And there's a shaman, and he like blesses the ayahuasca, which is in these like sort of like shot glasses. And you get Palo Santo smoked on you. I think it was Palo Santo. Then they give you an oil, and you like rub it on your arms and your face and your head and stuff. And then they give you this rice, which you clasp in your hands. You clutch it to your heart. You set your intention, and you throw it into the fire. So we did all these things, and then we go to sit on our mat. And it's about 45 minutes to 2 hours to kick in. Now, with ayahuasca, they often refer to ayahuasca as Mother Aya. And I didn't really understand why going into this. I was an agnostic, atheistic person, didn't really feel the need to like say, hey, there's some spirits here. And in my experiences, I'd never experienced anything spiritual, so I didn't see why this would be any different. But I was like, you know what, I do believe that this is medicine and that, it's had a profound impact on people's lives. There's plenty of testimonials out there on how much it's helped people with like lifelong depression and trauma, anxiety, PTSD. But the spiritual aspect, I was like, I can do without it. This is important context for the future. So I sit down. I'm expecting this to probably take me 2 hours, because I know I have high tolerance for this kind of stuff in general. So I'm sitting there, 45 minutes pass, and purging starts. So people start vomiting, and maybe some people were shitting themselves. I did not know if people were shitting themselves, but I'm sure someone did. I decide, not because I'm freaked out or anything, but I decide I want to go outside. The setup is that you're each in a lodge, and that's a lodge where you sleep, and it's a lodge where you do your ceremony. So it's not private at all. You are there when other people are going through their shit, which is actually great, and I think is a really important, powerful part of the healing experience. So I go outside. There are also people outside. I want us to be among the stars and with a fire and all that stuff. So I'm lying there. 2 hours pass. Nothing happens. Fortunately, 2 hours in, they say you can have a booster. So first they gave us 1 tablespoon at the very beginning. At the booster period, they give you another half a tablespoon. So I take another half a tablespoon, lie down, maybe 15, 20 minutes later, all of a sudden, I feel it. And when I say it's very different than anything else I've ever felt before. It's not like, oh, my body is in an altered state of consciousness or I'm high or something like that. It was not like that at all. Again, they referred to it as Mother Aya, and in that moment, it hit me because I felt like I was interacting with a being that was a divine, feminine, maternal energy and presence. There's no other way I can describe it. And honestly, unless I went through it myself, I just wouldn't believe it because I was just a very much science, we have, physical explanations for everything. We don't need this woo-woo stuff. But that's what I felt. It was unmistakable. And I remember lying there and it felt like I was being healed. Like this tension that I would carry in a lot of parts of my body from anxiety or what have you, it just felt like it was being released. I remember specifically it feeling like up my left sciatic nerve. So running from I think it's my ankle to upper back. It felt like a cool, temperature cool energy was running through there and I just felt relaxed. And I was fully conscious. Some people were clearly unconscious and in some different reality. I was very much conscious during this whole experience. And immediately I'm like, oh, wow, I did not expect to feel like I'm communing with some spirit, but that's exactly what it feels like. And it's not something it's something you feel and in your body. And it felt like meaning was just being communicated to me. The things I thought about were, again, it's a cliche, but it's eternal truth, how important love is. And I just felt incredibly grateful in that moment for my parents and my brother and my sister and my family and friends. And that felt like it was communicated to me. And it's not like you don't hear this stuff. Everyone knows love is important, blah, blah, blah. But it's different to hear it and to feel it is another thing. And it felt like I was incredibly receptive to this knowledge and it was being installed in me, like knowledge that I feel and I just act out naturally. So that was really, really powerful, but I was fully conscious. I wasn't unpleasant at all. That was my first experience. And, they say about ayahuasca, there's a few sayings about it. One of them is that you should do it 3 times because the first time you're being introduced to Mother Aya. The second time you're going on a date or getting acquainted with Mother Aya. And then the third time is when you're going deep. And it definitely felt like I was being introduced to something and it humbled me, frankly. But even so, after the trip, I didn't feel like, okay, my life has changed. I was like, okay, I definitely, some lessons, some insights were imparted to me and I feel them on a level that I didn't feel them before. But I don't feel like if I go back to my life immediately, my depression and anxiety and suicidal thoughts are going to be gone. So anyway, they tell you after the trip you should not have sugar because sugar, if you have a lot of it, can bring back the trip, but in a bad way. Of course, in my arrogance, I asked a volunteer, hey, do you guys have any more food? Because they give us vegetable and sweet potato chips and stuff, but I was still hungry. And one of the volunteers told me, yeah, they have some of the stuff they served you earlier. And also, if you want, they have almond butter and jelly in the pantry. And it wasn't his fault telling me. Of course, I'm an adult, right? So I went to the pantry, made myself a big-ass almond butter and jelly sandwich, ate it. Immediately, that feeling that you have when you eat too much sugar and your body's like, you should stop eating shit. I immediately felt that. But I was like, whatever. I like how it tastes, so I'm going to keep going. When I was walking back to my bed after I felt all of a sudden weak, then my vision went out and I got lightheaded. I almost collapsed. I was like, holy shit. Okay, we got a lesson about love, but I think I'm also getting a lesson about don't treat your body like shit. And if you don't treat your body well, it won't serve you. So fortunately, I didn't completely pass out. I almost did. And I ended up collapsing on my bed, felt bad. And then I woke up the next day and felt fine. And felt overall positive, but not like, I felt like it was a transitive positivity, not necessarily like, oh, my life has changed or anything like that. So it's the second day. The first day was Friday. And by the way, sorry, this was all about a month ago, on the weekend of September 11th. So the second day, that was Friday. Now we're in Saturday. It's Saturday morning. I haven't had much time to process the trip because my next ceremony is actually going to be at 10 a.m. So 10 a.m. we go into this wooded area. It's a beautiful, wooded grove. You lie down on the grass, or sorry, not grass. It's like dirt and woodsy forest shit. And you look into the sky, and there's like trees around you and everyone else who is deciding to partake in this ceremony. Even though this is one of 3 ceremonies, this one's optional, but I chose to opt in. Is there. The first night I took 1 tablespoon of ayahuasca and then another half tablespoon when the booster came around. This time they gave me an option of either 1 tablespoon or 1.5. So I decided to take 1 tablespoon for my second ceremony, the daytime ceremony, just because I knew I was also going to have a ceremony later that same day at night. So I wanted to just ease it up on a bit because I had experienced something like nothing I'd experienced before, and I wanted to just be a little more cautious. And cautious is definitely not what I do. But this was a really humbling experience so far. So I'm lying down, and this time I'm revisited about an hour in by the same divine, maternal, feminine, unmistakable presence. And this time, obviously, I'd experienced it before, so I'm more prepared. And I'm filled with gratitude and also the impression and the sort of the insights I had here as I'm lying there are just one of oneness and connectedness with everything and everyone. As cliche as it sounds, I remember looking at the trees and I was like, in some sense, I'm just a self-aware tree. For all I know, that tree could be self-aware as well, right? And even the people that you might want to despise the most, they're people too. And at some point, they were just a newborn baby coming into this world who then dealt with trauma and they process it the wrong way, and then they become a monstrosity like Donald Trump or Hitler or what have you. Not that I'm saying Donald Trump is Hitler, but just easy examples that come to mind. And it gave me a lot more empathy for them instead of judgment of them. And it made me realize that this is one of the things that's crucially lacking in this world, right? The tribalism and otherism that we paint each other with. And the second insight was that so much, in fact, all unhappiness comes from judgment of the experience that you're having instead of being present and accepting the experience. And that resonates for me in my life. No matter what good thing was happening, doesn't matter what award or how cool something you're doing is or who you're doing it with. If you're constantly in judgment or resistance and you're always like, well, it's not this, it could be better, you're never going to be happy. And I knew these things. It's not like these were revelations in the sense that I had never heard that you should be in the present moment and not judge it, or that everyone's connected. But again, I was in a state where I was receptive to it, and it felt like it was being communicated to me by this presence. So I'm lying there feeling good about that, and it really transformed my experience because I remember before that insight, I was actually lying on the ground. I was like, we're kind of like, it's kind of raining a little bit. I'm like lying kind of into the dirt, like, I wish I was like comfortable, blah, blah, blah. And then I realized, wait, I'm judging the experience, and that's the only reason I'm unhappy. There's nothing wrong with this experience right now. And then all of a sudden, it was transformed, and I felt super positive about the whole thing. Now, meanwhile, this is where we're going to start to get crazy. There's a girl, Asian woman, maybe in her 30s, who's lying on the ground, and she's like bent over like this, right? On the ground, though. And her body's like flailing, like full on flailing, but not in like a seizure type of way, but she's like full on, like, for lack of a better term, it looked like she was possessed. She was completely silent, but she's like flailing and like dancing, and her arms making these rhythmic like shapes and movements. And she'd do that, and then she'd collapse to the ground and do it over again. She did this for like a good 2 to 3 hours. And I remember seeing that, I was like, whoa, holy shit. First of all, this is like something from a movie. And second, I was thinking, wow, that's actually really beautiful, because it looks like the healing that she needs, because I remember seeing this woman, and she did look like she was in a really rough state. It looks like she's getting, and I felt really happy for her in that moment. And the volunteers who were watching over us, they weren't alarmed at all, which just shows you this was not an unusual experience. And part of me was like, well, I hope I have something, maybe not with the flailing and stuff, but something that intense happened to me, because I want to be healed too. But I left feeling grateful for her. After the daytime ceremony, we all go into our groups to talk about our experiences. And it's funny, everyone knows that experience of like being in a class or something where they say, everyone go around and say something, right? And you're like rehearsing your answer. I remember rehearsing my answer. I was like, it needs to be this articulate, eloquent, insightful, treatise on what I've learned from my first 2 experiences, very much in my head. And I finally give my answer, and the lady who's a therapist who's leading the group is like, wow, that was so articulate and rich. And I'm, of course, my ego's like, yeah, great. And then she's like, but I'm also detecting a lot of perfectionism. And I was floored because just like 2 weeks prior, my therapist of a year and a half had identified that, hey, you have a lot of perfectionism, and not like, interview, this is my greatest weakness. No, like all or nothing thinking, like, hey, if I don't get this thing, what's the point in living? That kind of perfectionism. But she had identified this in like 5 minutes. So I was like, hey, this is the universe telling me I have to work on this perfectionism streak. And also, I was like, I want this lady to be my therapist because she seems really good. And I did end up seeing her for therapy after, funnily enough. So now we've done 2 experiences. At this point, I'm a little desperate because I'm like, okay, even though I've had some insights here and definitely there's some stuff happening, this is not the profound, life-changing experience I was expecting, and I don't want to go back to feeling like life is not worth living. I want to kill myself and just being miserable moment to moment. So going into the 3rd ceremony, it's later that night. There's many people who feel like me, right? Who have had some stuff happen, maybe even scary experiences that they didn't know what to take away from, but they want to be healed. They want to be changed. So last night, they tell us, again, remember I took 1 and then a half tablespoon the first ceremony, 1 tablespoon the second ceremony. They tell us, hey, we're going to go deep, so you can take 2, 2.5, even 3 or more tablespoons. But if you take 3 or more, you have to talk to us first. And they also say, remember, the ayahuasca is still in your system, so less is more. Of course, being a Westerner, being conditioned to think, no, fucking more is more, go faster, higher, hotter, better, always. I'm like, no, I'm just going to take as much as they give me. So I'm standing in line. I go up to the shaman. I look him in the eye. I say, hey, look, I need to break through. And he says, okay, let's give you 2 tablespoons. And I say, can I have 3? And he looks at me and he's like, no, let's give you 2. He like studies me for a second. He's like, let's give you 2. And of course, my internal monologue is, well, I paid all this money. I flew all this way. I don't want to go back to feeling like I felt. So I need more. But I don't say that because he just seems wise. He just seems like a experienced, wise person. So I say, you know what? Let me just trust him. And he says, hey, look, if at 2 hours in you're not feeling anything, we can reconvene and you can have more. So I go back to my mat. I wait. I drink the ayahuasca. I end up spilling a little bit of it. So I'm like, fuck, not only didn't I not get as much as I want, I now fucking spilled the thing. But I'm like, you know what? One of the things they say about the ayahuasca experience is you need to just surrender and accept whatever's happening. So there's that. The other thing that they say is that you get what you need, not necessarily what you want, but you will get what you need. Mother Aya will give you what you need. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to get what I need. I just need to accept the experience. It's all going to be fine. I'm lying there, maybe an hour in. I hear actually around 45 minutes in, I hear people start to purge again, right? So they're like vomiting and like pooping themselves, presumably, and stuff like that. And this time it's way more intense. Way more people are doing it. So I'm like, okay, shit is going down tonight, literally, in some cases. Shit is going down. And I'm hoping for myself, well, I hope shit goes down for me because I've had 2 experiences and they've been good, but I want my life to be changed, right? And this time my intention going into the weekend was I just want to be the highest version of myself. But now I specifically had the intention of curing my depression, curing my anxiety, and curing myself of my perfectionism. So maybe an hour passes. I'm hearing all these people like talk in tongues and like there's like crying and sobbing and some flailing and puking. And if you were to walk in there and you had no context with what's going on, you would have thought this is a hellscape. It looks crazy. But when you're there, it actually is quite beautiful because you realize so many of these people have such tragic, heart-wrenching stories, and you just want them to heal, and you realize they're healing, and healing is not pretty, right? Just like surgery, this is not pretty, right? But it's good for you. So I'm lying there, maybe an hour passes, and then I finally start to feel something. I start to like come up. At first, there's a little bit of visual distortion, which is not super unusual with hallucinogenic substances. But then, and this was not what I was ready for, I realized I don't have any motor control except I can open and close my eyes and I can open and close my mouth. And I realized my arm is just moving of its own accord. And I'm like, okay, holy shit. My arm's like, I'm lying down and my arm's just like up. And I look at it and I'm like, well, I didn't do that. And all of a sudden my leg starts to get moved. And I say get moved because, for lack of a better description, it felt like almost like being on an operating table and having your body parts moved. Not like I'm spasming, but like a force is moving them. And I was revisited by the same divine, maternal, feminine energy, but this time it felt vast. It just felt like a godlike presence. And I was like, oh, holy shit, okay, well, this is, it's going down. It's definitely something's going on. So my body starts being moved, and it's all gentle. It's all gentle. It's not unpleasant. And I'm like, you know what, let's just surrender. This is obviously well outside of my normal experience, but there's no need to freak out. And in fact, I'm happy. I'm like, oh, finally something like super profound is clearly happening to me. And it feels like I'm just being healed. It feels like all this tension that I carried is being dropped. And there's this feeling in my head where just like, it feels like I'm just being cleared out. Like things are being rewired. Like, I don't know, new neural pathways are being formed or something. I don't know. But it felt like I'm being rewired and in a permanent way. Because I'm fully conscious. The only thing that's like anything that's weird going on is in my visual field, like things are a little bit distorted, but I'm still fully conscious of everything that's going on. So this happens for a bit. I'm like, okay, wow, I feel like I'm being rebooted, for lack of a better term. Then it stops for like a minute or so. I try to get up, and then I'm like forced back down. And I'm like, oh shit, I guess we're not done. I feel like I'm revisited by an equally immense energy, but this time it's like a masculine, paternal energy. And in that moment, I just had a flash of insight. I'm like, God, Allah, Pachamama, whatever you want to call it, whatever it is that humans are trying to label and refer to, I believe in it now because I'm in direct contact with it right now. And it wasn't like, I'm thinking this through and I've come to the conclusion. It was just a felt knowledge, like you just know it. And that was definitely not what I came into the weekend hoping for. So that was pretty profound, to say the least. And then my body started moving, but now is much more forceful. It's like a masculine, more forceful, firm energy moving me, but not in a uncomfortable way, but definitely much more forceful. And I felt my body convulsing, my neck would get stretched out, and my face was like, it must have looked crazy. I wish I could have recorded it. It was like just muscles were just like contorting. I was making the most grotesque like facial expressions and stuff. And but I was fine. And somehow the volunteers knew I was fine because they were escorting people who were like being a little disruptive, not disruptive intentionally, obviously, like if they're like in a completely different reality. But you know, they knew, or they knew I wasn't having like a bad reaction. They knew this is normal, which was crazy, and I did feel fine. And this goes on for a bit, and it feels like massive surges of energy are just being run through my body, and I feel like I'm being rebooted. And I remember a distinct moment where it felt like my vision was being reset. Like, you know when a TV's going like, bzz, bzz, like an old TV, like it's turning off and on? It felt like that happened with my vision several times. I remember like feeling like jolted, almost like you're being hit with a defibrillator. I've never been hit with one, but that's the analogy that came to mind. And I remember I carried a lot of physical manifestation of anxiety in my gut. It just feels super tight like all the time pretty much, unless I really focused on it. And I remember a moment where there was like this jolt, and then all of a sudden all that anxiety just dropped at once. I carried this for like 10 years, mind you, more than 10 years. And I breathed more deeply than I had in my entire adult life. And I was like, holy shit, I just got healed. And I felt it in my head, and I felt clear. And then finally, there were some visions and stuff, and I don't want to really talk about it right now just because I'm not sure how much of it is my ego trying to see things, or I don't know. At this point, I kind of believe in anything. Or I don't believe in everything, but I certainly believe there's things we don't understand that are much higher than us. After this was done, I got up and I looked around and I was like, holy shit, like I just knew everything is different. And not unlike, oh, I'm in a drug high, you know, this feels different, that kind of way. But no, something just got rebooted and I just feel naturally different. And then I looked around, I was like, holy shit, I think I just experienced a legitimate miracle. Like I experienced a miracle. Not even I think, I know I just experienced a miracle. Looking around, Other people are now starting to come through their trip. Look at a woman who had been having a difficult weekend. And I look at her and I can immediately tell she had an equally profound, miraculous experience. And she's like so happy and she's like, I love you. And I'm like, I love you too. And like, this is like everywhere. Like people are just so happy and you can tell people just like drop years of trauma. And they're like finally, and they're just so grateful. And I remember still one guy still going through his trip. It was like this Latin guy. He was like full on having a conversation with someone in Spanish who was not visible to us. I was like laughing and like clapping his hands, and it was really funny to watch him. And we found out later he had a vision of talking to his deceased grandma, which is really cool. And yeah, I got up and I was like, oh my God, I just feel light and integrated, and I just feel my body in a different way, and I just feel my energy in a different way, and I'm just way more in touch, and I felt like I just been woken up from a trance, like a 10, 15-year trance. And I go outside, and there's so many other people who clearly had equally profound experiences, and people are just so blissful and happy, and they're like looking to the sky. And when the energy is like perfect, when the vibe is like perfect, and like all this bliss, it starts to rain, like this gentle rain, and it's like this cleansing rain, and you're like, you can't even make this shit up. Like, I wasn't a God-fearing person at all. I was like, I believe in something. And yeah, I remember going to sleep, and for the first time in years, I felt excited to live the rest of my life in this state. And I can't say I felt that before. And I went to sleep, woke up, felt exactly the same. Felt amazing, phenomenal, clear, integrated, and just whole. I just felt alive and whole. And now this is the final day, so everyone's gonna leave. They asked how many people had a breakthrough that weekend, and it was like everyone, all but like maybe 2 people. And in fact, I suspect even those 2 people, they had a breakthrough, but they didn't realize it yet, and maybe they were approaching the experience with too much expectation or the wrong expectation. But anyway, I get on the plane, I go home, I feel phenomenal, but I'm still thinking, well, what if it was just the drug high or me being at the retreat? When I go back to my normal life, I'm going to go back to feeling like the same person. So I go to sleep. When I got back to LA, I wake up the next morning, I'm lying in bed, I'm like, oh, fuck, here we go. Well, we're going to see if everything's different. I get up, I'm like, okay, let's just meditate and see how I feel. I close my eyes, and immediately I know everything's different. I just feel in tune. I feel effortlessly happy. I just feel this effortless, like deep well of well-being and peace that I just didn't feel. I felt like my whole life I was pushing, trying to be happy, trying to project happiness, trying to get myself in the state. And now it was just effortless, and I just felt at peace. And my ego voice, it's still there, right? But I was so much more aware of it, and it's easier to just shift it to the side and not let it dominate my life. And I went outside to walk my dog, and I just felt effortlessly happy. A smile would just come to my face, whereas before I felt like I would have to put one there. It just came to me. And that was a month ago, and I felt the same ever since. And they say about the experience that 5% of it is a ceremony. The other 95% is what you do after. So now I'm more disciplined than ever about meditating, start going to yoga, eating healthier, and really taking care of myself. And I'm much more aware of how these routines help me, and it's helped me stay stable. There's still some days are worse than others, but nowhere near as bad as it was before. The depression is gone. I'm just not depressed anymore. The anxiety is from like a 10 to like a 1 or a 2. It still comes back occasionally, but I'm much more easily able to recognize it and remove it, right? Just by focusing on the present moment. And I experienced a legit miracle, and I was healed. And the crazy thing is, I wasn't the only one that weekend. I wasn't even one of 20. I wasn't even one of 50, which is a remarkable thing. So anyway, I'm sharing this not to tell you go take ayahuasca. Many people, they have some sort of spiritual awakening, and it can come from many sources, whether it's their religion and prayer, meditation, what have you. I remember reading Eckhart Tolle, Power of Now, and he talked about how it was in his 29th year, he just passed out because the pain of just living was just too much for him, and he woke up and he was in a blissful state. Sounds very much like what I went through, but I had plant medicine assistance. But to tell you that you need to keep going. And if you keep working on it, you will find yourself salvation. part of me was like, damn, I really wish I had tried ayahuasca years ago, right? But also part of me was like, well, I had so much growth over the last 10 years with ayahuasca. And in a sense, I don't think I would have had a profound experience like I did if I didn't ready myself for it by putting in all this work to just try to become a happier, more whole person. And then it felt like, life sometimes gives you an easy one, right? And it gave me ayahuasca, and it was like, here, we're gonna help you, just boost you to the next level, and that's what it felt like. So salvation is coming. There's light at the end of your tunnel. If you're going through anything like what I'm going through, I hope this gives you some inspiration and is a signal to you in the universe to look for whatever will give you your personal salvation. So thank you. Love you all. If you made it to the end of this video, that means this resonated with you in some way. I don't expect even 10 people to get through this video, but if anyone does, I appreciate it. I appreciate you letting me know too. And love you.